quiz. So remember that these videos will take place instead of Monday and Wednesday's class. And this one is continuing on our Dali in the 40s. And by the way, before I get started, I just wanted to remind you that a couple things. Your quiz, Dali and the 40s, and Dali and nuclear mysticism are due on the 26th, which is Sunday. All right, I will be back on the 20, I will be back on the 27th. All right, so the first piece that we're going to pick up on, again, in the PC method, remember PC means paranoid critical method, and this is a method that Dali is utilizing to create artwork. Remember, he's sleep depriving himself, and he's generating artwork through this method. So this is one of the most ambitious double images that we can look at, and it's called the hallucinogenic toreador. And if we look closely at this piece, and I don't know if it'll let me zoom in anymore, but nonetheless, what Dali has done is he used pencils that came from the brand Venus brand pencils. And these pencils had Venus de Milo on the front cover. So you're going to see many Venus de Milos. She looks like this, and I'm just kind of highlighting it for you so you can see what I'm talking about. That's Venus de Milo. There are 28 of her in this painting. So if you look at the painting, some of the docents at the Dali Museum claim the reason why there are 28 Venus de Milos is because Dali, down here in the corner, he's dressed up as a little boy, is being confronted with a fly. And supposedly a fly has 28 facets to their eye, so that's why there's 28 Venus de Milos in the painting. I don't know if this is necessarily true or false. I'm just telling you what I heard. So I'm going to go ahead and erase those two things. But what the double image is composing is Venus de Milo and her copies of herself are composing a toreador or a bullfighter. So the toreador is right here, and I'm going to use my pen to kind of show you. Here is his cheekbone, his head. It kind of looks like that. Okay. So this is the toreador. And I'm going to erase these lines, but I just wanted to see what I'm looking at. Right here is his nose. His mouth is located here. Here's an eye, and there's an eye. Okay, so I just made that incredibly awful. Let me erase that. So the toreador. The toreador was actually a real person, and his name was Manolete. Dali was quite fond of him, as was other people like Picasso. I mean, this guy was like a super athlete, kind of like Tom Brady is today. So he's well known. People from all over Spain went to go see him fight in the ring, and he was very good at what he did. Unfortunately, he was gorged to death by a bull, and this happened at 5 o'clock in the evening. The reason why I know this is because Garcia Lorca actually wrote a poem about Manolete, who is pictured as a toreador, and in this poem, Manolete mentions the color green and the time of death. So in this painting, if you look at the tie of the toreador is green, talking about Garcia Lorca's poem. And then up here, if we look at this Venus de Milo's face, we see there is an orange 5 located inside of it. So that orange 5, and I'm going to zoom this in as far as I can get it to go, is once again talking about Garcia Lorca's poem. So I know all of you watched the movie with us together. We all watched it in class, and we watched the movie On Sean Andalou, which it translates into Andalusian dog. There's actually a dog that is located at the bottom portion of this painting. So it looks like what is a negative for a photograph. It's a Dalmatian, so it has spots, and it has its head downward drinking in the water. So that is the downward facing dog, if you're into yoga, just joking around. But no, that is actually the dog from On Sean Andalou. And remember that was Garcia Lorca's nickname. So this painting deals with a lot of Dali's past. It talks about Garcia Lorca. I think I told you in class that he met terrible ends. He was killed in the Spanish Civil War by Franco's men. And remember, Dali and Garcia Lorca, it is extremely likely that they had a relationship. So Dali is remembering his friend, whether it was a friend or more than that. Nonetheless, he shows up in this painting. Another thing that I want to point out is we can see the bowl. The bowl is located on the lower left-hand side of the painting, and I'm just going to kind of outline it there. And the bowl has some spheres coming out of its back. And we're going to be talking about nuclear mysticism together in class, or actually probably through a video, but nonetheless, you'll learn what those little spheres mean. So the spheres that are coming out of the bowl, right now, I'm just going to let you know that it's talking about nuclear mysticism, where at a subatomic level, none of the atoms are touching, and we can literally see the life force of the bowl leaving it. So that's how I interpret those spheres that everybody always asks about. The other thing I do want to mention is Dali himself makes an appearance, and he makes an appearance down in the lower right corner of this painting. So Dali has a hoop, and he also has a stick. That was a game that young kids played around Victorian times and to the turn of the century. Hey guys, it's kind of like the hula hoop was for the 50s, and now we have, electronic scooters. So kind of same thing, but they didn't have electricity then, so a hoop and a stick is what you got. So there's Dali in his favorite little sailor's uniform, and that uniform he paints himself in a couple times in a couple paintings. He was the best dressed kid at school. He got picked on, so therefore the kids threw grasshoppers down his shirt. Not a fun experience. So if you see grasshoppers, which there aren't any in this particular painting, but if you see them in other paintings, it's trying to get rid of that anxiety. So Dali, if you look at the shadow, it becomes a little bit more perverted, which we come to know Dali as being a pervert in most of his paintings. But nonetheless, we're going to skip over that really quickly and talk about the flies. So there's several flies in this. Flies are a symbol of death. So there are flies up here in the toreador's hat. There are flies down in the lower portion of this painting. And there's even a fly in the eye of the bull. So all of these basically are reinforcing the idea of a memento mori, or death. So the flies, if we look at them in the bullseye, it makes sense it's there. But if we look at the flies, kind of confronting Dali, but we do have one fly that's, pretty much changing course, and she's heading over here. And it's very, very, very hard to see, so I'd highly recommend looking at another image of this. But there is a woman, and she's on a raft, and she's in some water, and that's what that image is. So let me take the blue line off of there just so you can see it a little bit more clearly. And maybe if I zoom up, it might work a little bit better. But we see two things. We see the fly coming towards her, and we also see these shadows, and it looks like a shadow of the woman bent over. Now, we saw that same woman in infancy, adolescence, old age, adolescence, and infancy. We saw her in that painting. That's one of my favorite paintings. But she is right here, and she's coming towards this woman on the raft. So what had happened is they had built a Club Med in the middle of the rocks of Cape Creus, and Dali's very upset about this because he likes to go to the rocks and imagine and use his imagination to determine what the rocks look like. It's the same practice as basically cloud watching. So if I go to the beach and I look up in the clouds and I see something that looks like a dog or a cat, I'm like, oh, hey, check this out. It looks like a dog. That's what he did with those rocks. They built a Club Med in the middle of them, and he was very upset, so he sent flies in to chase her off. Now, his flies didn't work for a very long time, and they only started working in 2003 when the Club Med was removed and the whole area was deemed a national park. So Dali's flies worked, but it was after Dali's death, and he died in 1989. So I think he probably would have been pretty happy about the Club Med, basically not being there anymore. Okay, so we talked about flies, we talked about the bull, we talked about the dog, we talked about the toreador himself. Let's talk about a couple other elements in this painting. At the top of the painting, I just wanted to point out that this is Gala. This is not Christ. This is Gala. She is watching the bullfight. And in fact, if you read the painting going from right to left, you will see Venus de Milo is turning and getting more and more masculine as she turns. And in fact, this Venus de Milo literally becomes a bullfighter with his cape up to in honor of the fight to Gala. So this is a meeting of Spanish machoism with the idea of feminine beauty. Western culture considers Venus de Milo to be a symbol of beauty because she was basically a Greek sculpture that was made out of bronze, and it was so sensual that people came from all over the place to view Venus de Milo. The Romans, they made a marble copy of her, thank God, because the original copy, the bronze copy, has long since been lost to antiquity. Just to let you know, if you make anything of bronze in antiquity, there's very few items left because they were repurposed and made into other things. So if you see something made out of bronze from Greek antiquity, it's rare. Usually that means that someone has found it in a shipwreck, actually. So, or maybe even in a gravesite. So that's why Venus de Milo, the original copy, isn't to be found. The Roman copy, I should mention, is in the Louvre. So if you've been there in Paris, or if you're going to Paris, hopefully you get to do that someday. You can see her in her glory, made out of white marble. Okay, so Venus de Milo. Yeah, if you look in the holes in the back of the Venus de Milo, they're right over here. There's some holes. That is talking about surrealist days, like access to your subconscious mind, your dreaming mind. And also talking about dreaming, we have another little tiny double image in here, and it is of Voltaire. So I'm going to kind of blow this up. I actually circled that and the rose. So below the rose, there is a tiny Voltaire. When you see this painting, it's actually quite big because this painting is like 15 feet tall. But Voltaire is composed, remember, of the two Dutch slave traders and the figure of the slave. Dali's making a statement that if you believe in Voltaire, you're enslaving your mind. So that is what's going on in this painting. And this is, again, the hallucinogenic Toreador. It is at the Dali Museum. This is one of the masterwork collections. Masterworks for the Dali have to take Dali at least a year plus to complete and have to be of a very large size, as you can see this is. All right, I'm going to end the video because I think this is about 10 minutes long, and you're definitely going to have a part 2, maybe even a part 3 of this section.